Our Taliban leaders vow to respect the rights of women in their first public comments since retaking control of Afghanistan. Now, every week at this time, we take a look at climate change and the implications for our planet's future in our series called Climate Critical. And today the focus is on the ocean. A disturbing report has shown that the warming seas in the Pacific are driving tuna away from their traditional waters to colder climes. Why does that matter so much? Well, the fish stocks are the main source of revenue for some Pacific Island nations who could see their government revenues fall by up to 17% as they lose the ability to charge for licenses to fish in their waters. So if you lose that sort of income, well, you lose the ability to provide for your own schools and hospitals and roads. It's a threat to the existence of states like the Cook Islands or Solomon Islands and the Marshall Islands. As it is, no part of the planet is more at risk from climate change than the ocean. Those warmer waters, the rising sea levels and ocean acidification, as it's called, pose a massive threat to marine ecosystems, but of course also to people who live in coastal areas or depend on the seas for their livelihood. And what's more, many of the impacts are irreversible, certainly in our lifetimes, and look set to continue for generations to come. Now, the IPCC's recent report warns a global ocean rise approaching 2 metres by the end of the century can't be ruled out. As many as 200 million people could live below sea level then by 2100, and with 160 million more affected by higher annual flooding. As for ocean temperatures, they're on the rise too. More than 90% of the excess heat trapped by greenhouse gases is absorbed by the world's oceans, threatening fragile marine ecosystems from coral and plankton to fish and whales. And CO2 from burning fossil fuels, well, that dissolves in the oceans and it makes them more acidic, posing further threats to marine life. Oceans absorbing nearly 30% of excess carbon dioxide. When that's absorbed by seawater, the CO2 forms carbonic acid. It just points to huge challenges and great uncertainty for many of the ocean's ecosystems, all of which amounts to a major challenge for my guest, Peter Thomson, who serves as the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for the Ocean. Peter, thanks very much for joining us. And as a Fijian, of course, if we just touch on the tuna stocks concerns, I mean, that is something very close to your country and your heart, no doubt.
Yeah, thanks for that, David. The Southwest Pacific tuna situation is indeed very worrying when you think about the fact that this is one of the world's best managed fisheries. And it's going to take the tuna, by moving away from the exclusive economic zones of these countries of the Southwest Pacific, the small island developing states, will be moving to the high seas and therefore will not be the best managed fish stock anymore. They'll be outside those zones. So change is coming, and we have to adapt accordingly.
But I think perhaps one of the most disturbing elements of this, we can talk about, reducing CO2 emissions and trying to bring down the rising temperatures. But some of the changes for the ocean, it can't just be changed back again either. They are irreversible.
No, but your tuna example is a good one. If we can bring down the rate of anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions, that problem, it doesn't go away, but it diminishes significantly. So all of our efforts have to be towards bringing down our GHG emissions.
Yeah, that said, Peter, you've got islands, I mean, let's take Kiribati is the one that is so often quoted, of course, which is effectively sinking, the rising water levels. So we can talk about tuna and immediate problems, but there are existential issues here which these islands have to face up to.
Quite right. I mean, sea level rise is happening because of the warming temperature of the ocean, but also because of the melting ice on land, on glaciers and on Greenland ice sheet and so on. I always say, think of it as one bathtub. The ocean is one ocean, and if there's water flowing off the Greenland ice sheet, it's going to cause rising levels in that bathtub, be you in Tuvalu or Kiribati, or be you along the coastline of Florida.
Let me ask you this then. You have to look for solutions. You have to look to ways ahead. What can be done to improve the situation realistically?
Well, that's why we call the Glasgow COP26, the climate change COP being held in November in Glasgow in Scotland, the last best chance we've got. It's obviously we're not expecting perfection from that, but this is the great opportunity we have to lower our greenhouse gas emissions. And if we can do that, we'll be giving our grandchildren a chance. If we carry on the way we are at the moment, heading towards a 3 to 5 degree world, we're not giving them a chance at all. That's a world of chaos.
Yeah, I mean, we often talk about the need for governments to make big decisions, policy decisions, which are then acted upon. Is there a value still in talking to people as individuals to take on their own responsibility? I mean, each person is a mere drop in the ocean in a way, but does that help?
Absolutely. Obviously, the governments are more important, and that's what Glasgow will be all about. And it's the major emitters that are important ones, and it's the coal burners who are the worst of all. And they have to be held to account for those rising sea levels and the destruction of age-old cultures in Atoll Republic, the South Pacific. But yes, individuals can do an awful lot as well. I mean, I'm not going to preach, but I haven't owned a car for 20, 30 years now. I don't eat beef, even though I like beef. All these things that you can do as an individual make a huge difference.
There is obviously a drive to a certain extent to develop more protected marine areas and zones. Desperately difficult when you're talking about the ocean, isn't it? Because it's not even as if you can look at hard borders and say, from here to here, we're going to protect that and let's get an international agreement.
That's true. The world is moving towards adopting a 30 by 30. In other words, 30% of the world being in protected zones by 2030, which science is telling us we've got to have. As far as the ocean is concerned, we've got to be smart on where that 30% is, because the ecosystems are changing in the ocean because of that acidifying and deoxygenation and warming to which you referred.
Peter, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Peter Thomson, who is the UN Secretary General Special Envoy for the ocean. Peter, referring there to acidification, for example. If you don't know your CO2 from your CFCs or your COP from your cap and trade, Climate Critical's Jargon Buster might help a little bit. We're diving deep into the issue of ocean acidification, for example. So let's spell it out for you. Around a quarter of the carbon dioxide we pump into the air gets absorbed by seawater, changing its chemistry. It makes it more acidic, and that process dissolves the shells of some sea animals, for example. It stops corals and plankton from growing properly, and a drastic decline in some species then ripples up the food chain. It hits fish stocks and threatens the diets and livelihoods of millions of people. That is ocean acidification. We will be putting that out. I'll put that out on my Twitter handle as soon as this bulletin is over. And we'll have much more of that to come. You're watching BBC News. Thanks for being with us.